what's going to go wrong, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're starting to have a lot of people here. Maybe we'll give it another minute or so. You are a popular guest, Nasim. You'll be happy to know.
Thanks.
And we've been doing these quite regularly across a range of different topics. I guess we gave it a name even, Flex Forward, because I guess, you know, everything's going to change, but we're going to try to change in the right ways for the future that's ahead of us. We work in the world of workplaces, offices, which have been pretty much closed for, I don't know, I'd say 6 weeks. Is that about right? 7 weeks?
Time is not my forte these days.
Yeah, I passed my 50th day in my own seclusion here about a week ago. So I think it's around that long, 7 or 8 weeks. And we operate in a bunch of countries. So, you know, from Germany to California to Japan to India to Brazil. And we are seeing all the differential things people are doing. Germany's open again. And on Monday is an important day because France will be open.
Oh, wow.
And I was running this morning and I noticed that even my neighborhood Starbucks plans to open following the French schedule on Monday. So we shall see how all that goes. I doubt very many people will be in the office in any of those markets, and even when the US gets going, but we'll have a chance to talk about all that. Welcome everyone to Flex Forward. Our topic today is enterprise site selection and portfolio optimization. I'm Amol Sarva, I'm the co-founder of Knotel. And I have Nasim Yalpani from Dropbox. I'm excited about this. Hi, Nasim.
Hi, Amol. Thank you so much for having me today.
How did we manage to get you to come on here with us? Are you just a long-time listener, first-time caller?
Absolutely, yeah. No, I'm a big fan of your guys' work, and I think this topic is really what attracted me. I mean, let's put all the cards on the table, try to figure out what the tea leaves are saying, and try to talk about what we want to do looking ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the crystal ball, right? This came up in our prep for this thing. Let's see exactly how good our crystal ball is. And, you know, on some topics, we really need to think about just today and tomorrow. And on some topics, I guess we need to think about September. And on some, we need to think about 21, 22, and the years ahead. So I'm really curious to hear some of your thoughts. We've got well over 100 people on, and I'm sure they're interested to hear from you and not from me. So might as well get going. You're the head of real estate and workplace services and physical security at Dropbox, and I wonder if physical security was always part of your mandate. So let's rewind to a few years ago. Have you been with Dropbox for quite a long time? And if not, where did you come from when you joined Dropbox?
You know, I've been with Dropbox for just under 2 years, and I joined from Uber. You know, so I think you had a great conversation with them a few weeks ago, and before that, some more time on the corporate occupier side, which, you know, they've been essential in this time to give us some really great data and information about what they're seeing around the world. So
I see.
Oh, sorry.
I see. And so you joined Dropbox to help run the workplaces that serve your staff around the world. And I guess a year ago, it was, hey, we need a new office, a bigger office. I mean, what was the gig, if you think back to those long ago times? What were your duties and your daily concerns?
Yeah, it was definitely hyper growth, you know, as a lot of these startups in the Bay are all about. And we were actually really focused on our global strategy. You know, even a year ago, we were looking at setting up a new location, looking at where we could source new talent. But specifically about a year ago, we were on the cusp of opening up our new headquarters in Mission Bay. And we were obviously counting down the minutes and the days until that, but also we started to launch a sublease strategy because we had purposely taken on an excess space to grow into, and we're looking for folks who needed short-term space. So, you know, times have changed a little bit, you know, since then.
Yeah. I mean, that range of concerns is quite familiar to me from the types of customers we work with in San Francisco. And I guess you were thinking San Francisco, it's really hard to get enough space. It's a really difficult sort of region. There's sort of a commuter vibe going on. Things are expensive. Labor costs are high. Where else should we be building offices? Standard slate.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess it wouldn't have felt easy back then, but I guess it's nothing compared to now.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been incredibly dynamic this past few months trying to figure out this new normal.
Yeah, when did you get into the new HQ? So you guys got that done for Mission Bay at some point last year?
Yeah, August of last year we moved in. We were in a phased build out, so we kept building it out after we occupied, and we were almost done when all this came about. We were wrapping up some final spaces, and really had settled into the space.
Hmm. And what would you describe as the approach that you guys took when you thought about the design and deployment at that big HQ? Like, how many people did you have, and open office versus activity based? How cellularized? Like, give me a feeling for what it's like at the palace where Dropbox makes the magic happen.
Yeah, I mean, I was very fortunate to partner closely with one of our co-founders, and we really the goal and the mission of the new headquarters was to embody our mission statement. We wanted to create a new enlightened way of working. So we were playing around and experimenting with new ways of collaborating, and everybody at Dropbox today has their own space, their own assigned desk. Really hoping to support Dropboxers and all the different ways that they work, whether it's heads down spaces or really fun kind of collaborative coffee shop type of environments. And so that's what we were landing about a year ago.
Yeah, I guess like maybe the industry nerds would call that activity-based working, right? So there would have been dedicated desks and certainly conference room, but you have like cafes and chill out zones and exercise rooms and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so in a way, when you undertake to do that, you're running a health club and a restaurant, you're running a commons, you're running a park and a playground, and you're running everything.
Yeah, a lot of stuff that we don't get to enjoy these days. Yeah.
Okay, and now it's now. And I guess these last 2 months would have been quite tricky. Like perhaps everybody else, you went through the tidal wave around the world of shutdowns and security responses and safety responses for your individual staff. And at this point, are all the offices closed?
Yeah, we've elected to keep our offices closed right now, and we're evaluating, through each region and geo, kind of what's changing and watching that closely. But we really want to ensure that our Dropboxers feel safe and secure, and not that they have to come back to work prematurely, because we're thriving in this remote work lifestyle.
So you've told the staff they don't have to come in, that you prefer they don't come in, but does that mean literally nobody is going to the office at all? Are they closed, locked?
Yeah, as of today, we're really just having essential workers come in, and that's a very, very small percentage of our population. And of course, that could change week over week looking ahead.
Right, right. Well, I guess that gives you a little breathing room. And at some point, you're going to have to come back. So what's on your mind right now? What are you working on? I'm sure your job is not easier compared to May last year.
Yeah, I think that, I am fortunate to have a brilliant team, and we are all sitting around and scenario analyzing and, problem solving on the fly, because this has been super dynamic, and we thought we knew what we were entering a few months ago, and it continues to change. So luckily, I think that through environments like this, we've been able to reach out to our network and our peers, and we're all figuring this out together. And it's been really incredible to try to develop the new best practices on the fly, share ideas, and really also at the same time balance how we are super supportive of our employees, because that is our primary focus, to enable them to do their best work and to feel safe and secure. And so that's been also top of mind.
Does that mean you're partly responsible for work from home best practices too? Has that become part of your actual job? Like, oh, I got to check these tools, I got to check engagement, I got to check if people are using them the right way. Is that suddenly part of running workplace?
Yeah, I think remote experience is sort of the new thing that we're head on trying to figure out. We've been engaging folks in coffee chats and town halls, and really trying to make sure that we have a pulse on how everyone's feeling and if they're able to prioritize things and be productive in this new normal. But the other part of it too is this is our forte, right? We are the culture carriers of the company, and so that helps us to be successful in this.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder what it's like. I mean, you are a product fundamentally that enables remote and distributed.
Mhm.
And I'm sure that's right at the core of your company's best practice and the way people already work. Presumably, on a typical day back in November, you did not have 100% of assigned seats occupied by staff. You probably didn't have a seat for everybody who worked in the Bay Area. You probably had folks that were remote, but technically part of the Bay Area HQ.
Mhm.
Can I get a flavor for that? Like, what was the pre-COVID remote and hybrid working rhythm that you guys were supporting?
Yeah, I mean, we've always been incredibly supportive of work from home. While we maybe didn't have a mass portion of our workforce that were dedicated to remote distributed locations around the world, we've definitely had folks who had a home office, but mostly worked remotely. And so we're really continuing to experiment and see how much we can lean into that now that we've had this mass experiment and it's been working so well for us. And of course, this is what we are trying to enable with our product. So it's great to see it come to fruition.
Yeah, would you guesstimate that 80% utilization at HQ back in November or 50% utilization on a typical day?
Yeah, I think just under 80% is probably normal. We did have a lot of great amenities at the time moving, and I think it's great to come in and go to the gym and have your lunch and all those wonderful things that we were offering, and obviously we'll hope to offer when we go back to normal. But that did attract a lot of folks to come in and be part of our community.
Hmm. Yeah, for me, um, especially when we started Knotel, I mean, we started Knotel about 4.5 years ago, and I'm sort of a tech person. I started a mobile phone company, smartphone company, enterprise collaboration. I'm just sort of, it's always been my thing. And in the early days, I almost kind of half wished the company would be fully remote. And so I'd never have to go to the office and I'd never have to sit in a meeting and I could just sort of check in on some collaboration document or something and have a quick conversation with a handful. This was a bit of an unrealistic wish, I must confess. As we
Yeah.
grew to being hundreds of people, you really do need to deal with folks in real life. But this last couple of months, I am not surprised by the way we're working personally. Personally,
Mhm.
I'm using all the tools that I always kind of like to use in the ways that I always thought they should be, and they're kind of good enough. And yes, there are some things that I wish we could still do. I like to walk around the office and just say hi to folks in a serendipitous way. Sometimes really complex conversations are a little bit better when you're just in the same room. And I wonder, uh, what are the insights that you have been able to find from your people this last couple months? Like, what's surprising and what is more true than ever as you see folks all work?
I think we've been surprised to see how little this has affected our productivity as a company. We are still driving towards all of our goals, and our engineering teams are actually doing very well, which I think traditionally folks think that engineers have to be plugged in, in their environment to work with each other. So that's been great. We are finding that some folks are really having a harder time, and that's maybe due to their personality or just how their home setup is, whether right now, folks, a lot of people are balancing their family life in a very untraditional way, and that will hopefully not be the case for very much longer. But so we want to make sure that long term, um, you know, there aren't. It isn't that every worker profile, every person is going to be super successful in a complete remote scenario. So I think really trying to get that flexibility and adaptability to set up spaces that they are able to jump in and out of, and to really have a hybrid model is probably where we're headed.
Yeah, yeah. Any tools that you think are more popular than you thought they would be, or things that are unsurprising? Have people started using paper a lot more, for example, or some of the other internal Dropbox products?
Yeah, I know. I mean, in early indications are right now that we had a lot more signups, of course, and we'll see what those yield in the coming months, because folks were looking for those immediate tools to help them bridge this new remote work. So, we're really excited about what it looks like in a few months to see how folks are adapting to our platform and what they're using more and more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The unmeasurable aspects of teamwork. Um, that's the kind of stuff people sort of gesture at when they talk about what's tough to do when you're all remote. I think certainly focused work gets a big benefit. You know, if you're deep in a spreadsheet or well into some large technology project, it does help you with focus. The unmeasurable things, like, are there some things, are your people saying, actually, I'm really eager to get back. Like, I just can't wait to do this. Maybe projects are moving on time, but there's this kind of ineffable something missing.
I think so. You know, a lot of folks are doing very well because they are able to cut their commute time out and have more flexibility. And we've been very generous in, you know, setting up completely different working hours for folks so that they can balance home life priorities. But there are folks who are very much missing that social interaction. And to your point, I think some of the very strategic conversations that require cross-functional collaboration, that's very hard to do in a completely remote scenario. You don't get those hallway conversations that are so needed, and you know, more of understanding a person through their body language and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that is different for me is I had gotten to a point last November or December, and I hope I'm not the only one, where I would never call anyone without letting them know I was going to call them.
Yeah. Yep.
In advance. Not necessarily scheduled, but, you know, I might write a text or something and say, have you got a few? Something like that.
Yep.
I now call people a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same. I mean, I think I was almost disturbing some of my friends thinking, oh, I have to call you back. No, I'm just giving you a call, just seeing if you're around. We'll do, you know, it's
Yeah.
kind of taking that back years. Remember when I just would give you a call because I was thinking about you? So definitely, you know, it's important to figure out all the ways to stay connected, and you know, it's not always through chat, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, so let's see. Have you guys set a date for when you're coming back? And have you given some thought to what the comeback looks like, day 1, day 30, day 90?
We've not set a date yet. I am working closely with other folks on our crisis management team, and you know, we definitely want to take a regional approach because we've seen that you know, Australia, places in EMEA, obviously Asia, are making progress. So we don't want to restrict them just because we are a San Francisco-based headquartered, you know, type of organization. You know, I think that a lot of this ties back to what we were just talking about. You know, not only the quantitative data of are we meeting our deadlines, but the qualitative side. You know, how much longer can folks really manage this? For those that work in very tight urban locations, they don't have the space to really breathe in their home locations and work. And so we want to allow for those release valves when we can. We are still debating what is the quality of returning when you have the PPE, the social distancing, potentially amenities closed. You know, what value does that bring? But if that does bring value for certain individuals, we want to assess how we can make that happen for them.
Yeah, I mean, I have some colleagues who, well, they didn't quite say it this way, but what I think they meant is if you told me I was going to work from home forever, I'd have to move.
Yeah.
It's like your personal economics change. It doesn't mean you move out of the city, but like you might have to move to a new home, basically, to accommodate permanent work.
And that's what's so interesting is, you know, if this trend continues to grow, where will the talent go? You know, will the workforce continue to get more and more distributed because there are opportunities where you can work remotely or only come in sometimes. So if 2 times a week you have the long commute, but you don't have it the majority of the time, then we may have a ton of flexibility coming our way that we've never contemplated. And that brings more opportunities for both the employee and the, you know, the offices.
Yeah, I mean, we have a product line called Geometry, which was designed for offices. So it's like a modular architectural objects thing. It's phone booths and modular meeting rooms, so you can sort of redesign your office real fast. And we're now thinking there's going to be a lot of demand in homes for things like phone booths. I mean, if you've been on one of these calls where a bunch of kids are all running around behind, you can see the argument for that, at least for a certain select group of executives. But maybe you're thinking about redesign in the sort of medium term back at HQ and at your other locations. Like, are there some ideas in motion already about how the workplace will be different? And what about those amenities? You know, do I get to have that chill out room again?
I think that the pendulum will swing back. We're not currently contemplating big investments in, you know, reorganizing or reconfiguring our workstations. We absolutely are working on the short-term solutions of checkerboarding and other types of ways to allow for the social distancing that we want to promote. But, 2 years from now, will that be the case? Most likely not. And so we do want to continue to focus our investments in allowing for more of the flex hybrid solutions. So whether that means that we continue to invest in a distributed workforce and then find locations that are kind of that center of gravity for that distributed workforce and have a new flex office where folks can come in collectively from time to time for collaboration.
I see. So it's the same workplace strategy, but with lower utilization for a year or two. And the estimate that we will get to the other end of this thing and we won't be in pandemic mode all the time. And maybe we get back to something like 80% utilization. But in the medium term, there's some kind of portfolio shift that ends up happening. You mentioned the hubs versus the most peripheral locations and how you might trade off. So you guys are in about a dozen cities around the world. And maybe you could talk a little bit about the portfolio you have today and how big are things and which ones do you consider these little toeholds versus hubs per region versus major HQs?
Yeah, we absolutely will continue to invest in our major hubs. We have our headquarters in San Francisco. We've got a big office in Seattle, our international headquarters in Dublin. And these are permanent locations where we will, potentially lean into work from home and more flexibility, but this will be the hub where folks do the major decision-making and collaboration. We have a number of flex offices around the world, and I think I potentially see those offices maybe continuing to grow in quantity as we spread talent even further to new locations like we were launching even a year ago. We'll continue to look for those new talent hubs. And, obviously what's so nice about having, let's say, almost half of the portfolio be flex office is that you get a chance to renew your thinking in those locations from year to year and really remap and experiment a little bit. So I think we'll be piloting quite a bit of these hybrid models and seeing how they work for different teams.
So let's see if I understand. You've got the 4 big centers, and those are more than 100 people, up to 1,000 people, something like that?
Yeah, and let me say there's 5 or 6 of those around the world.
And then there's another 6 locations which are relatively smaller. And does that mean they're 10 people or 50 people?
Say 50 or below, yeah, around there.
And there is where you've made the choice to use different flex partners, whoever the co-working or flexible office kind of person might be. We, as we were saying a little earlier, don't currently work together, so it's somebody else, I guess. Maybe one day it will be us, but in those smaller locations, they get sort of bigger and smaller over time, and you can choose the strategy on those things in different ways. So you think there'll be more total locations of the smaller size, like maybe a new city, as you do more recruiting? Yeah,
I think so. I mean, we'll see if even our current locations, if folks would rather work from home more frequently, and we will, establish free address or hoteling and in the current footprint. But yeah, net new locations with a distributed workforce is definitely something we want to experiment with.
Is there a cutoff where you don't open a location? Like if a city's got 5 people who you hired for the region, maybe you're thinking, all right, they can be remote. Like at what point do you say, like, all right, we need an office in Stockholm or in, Madrid or something like that?
Yeah, it's been a little bit about what leaders are in place. If someone is running a massive region with 5 key team members, we want to allow for them to have the collaboration. So that's really been our model to make sure that folks feel really well supported to do their best work. And we'll continue to make sure that we're doing that so that in some cases it will be very regional and cultural based. If folks are just used to going to the office and believe in that fundamentally for how they get their work done, I'm sure we'll continue to support that.
Right, because managers and teams have different styles, and some of them need this thing, some of them need that thing. You're not issuing a dictate where, this team's too small. And how do you feel about shared workplace environments? It sounds like you do use some shared workplaces in your portfolio. So in the future.
Right, and that's where when we go more distributed, right, if we have a number of folks, let's say, currently we don't, but potentially we will have in, the Southeast, for example, well, maybe they're distributed around a general metropolitan where we can have a space for them to hop into every once in a while from time to time.
But by shared, what I mean is it a Dropbox center in whatever, Miami or Atlanta or Austin, and it's a Dropbox office, Dropbox sign outside, nobody else around? Or are you fine if it's embedded into like a multi-tenant environment, something that resembles maybe co-working? I wonder how attitudes are on that, because I've been hearing various sides. You don't have a lot of clarity and control over everybody else who's there, but on the other hand, maybe they have really good standards. Like, I don't know. What's your?
Yeah, no, we're very much open to multi-tenant. Absolutely. Yeah.
So as you are thinking about the next few years, I guess you're thinking more locations, certainly fine to have smaller ones. You'll use Flex for those. And for your major centers, you think they'll get bigger too? You'll concentrate more folks at those?
We'll see. Yeah, I don't think we're going to exponentially grow our footprint because I don't foresee us mandating checkerboarding or social distancing for perpetuity, Smart. We'll continue to refine what makes sense for us in our footprint. But, the market is changing and it's going to continue to normalize for a while. And so we might as well take that opportunity to try some stuff out.
Yeah. So, site selection historically, I guess the company was born in the Bay Area and it was important, but you started out in Mountain View and you ended up in San Francisco. That must have been is that true, or am I missing a step there?
I don't believe so. No, we've always been San Francisco based, but we do have an office in Mountain View. We have a presence there. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So how have you thought about site selection in all these different cities where you operate? Have you done the SF version or the suburban version in different places? What are the things that go into your planning and your thought, and how they'll evolve over time?
Traditionally, we have been really focused on city centers, and whether that was due to our sales talent that we were trying to hire or our engineering talent. I think that's going to change quite a bit because we are finding that, a number of our cohorts are also looking for, sort of the new city, and whether that new city is now going to be the center of gravity or not. Maybe it's a new region, right? So I think we're going to shift that strategy quite a bit and try it out, without necessarily long-term commitments, but definitely leaning into those kind of hybrid flex spaces.
Why city centers? What's the philosophy on city centers? I mean, because the big cities you mentioned are actually big, expensive, dense cities. I mean, even Seattle is pretty expensive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been the tricky thing, is to continue to fight for talent in those markets. We traditionally have done so because we wanted to ensure we had the talent pool. And, it'll be really interesting to see if those talent pools continue to be concentrated in the urban centers in the coming years. If there is a migration, we will follow for sure. And, definitely try to find more untapped talent around the world.
What kind of advice would you give to the smaller companies that are trying to navigate? I mean, I guess at a certain point you were even thinking of getting some parts of your portfolio and offering them to smaller companies because you didn't need them anymore. Mm-hmm. You're managing a pretty big portfolio with quite a few workers, thousands of workers. And then on the other hand, there's folks at a further extreme, 100,000, 200,000. And then there's folks that are running a 50-person company or a 100-person company. What would you be doing if you were in their position about, return to work? I guess this next year is an important thing, especially for smaller companies that they may not have 10-year plans for their workplace strategy.
It's definitely going to be iterative, right? I think for the next year or so, it'll be an opt-in, right? Opt-in to try this work from home pilot, or opt-in to come back and try the new, way of reviving the office into what we are used to. For the smaller folks, given how the market is going to change quite a bit, at least the next 6 months, and we'll figure out where it lands. I really am promoting different pilot programs if you can get that support internally, because it'll be interesting to see what works for every organization, what works for different worker profiles, and also, the locations around the world. The different geos are quite different beasts, right? So what works in the Bay Area doesn't necessarily work in India, for example, right? You're going to have to try and see what lands, and then as they do become successful, scale and work on that momentum.
What's the wackiest thing you've heard from your colleagues from other firms? Because folks are taking quite different approaches. It sounds like you are watching the needs of your people and your managers and trying to be adaptive to the way they figure out how they want to do it rather than dictating something from HQ. But you must have been conferring with colleagues of different stripes and hearing some unusual perspectives, some rather extreme. In our portfolio, actually, we have one company, I think we serve about 400 corporates, and some of them are smaller, but most of them are quite big. One of the smaller ones, and literally just one, only one company, has said they're just going to go all work from home. And if they change their mind, they'll let us know. Now, I'm surprised that it's such a small number, but I'm also surprised at the level of fortitude required for a CEO to just say, okay, staff, you don't have a desk anymore, whether this worked for you or it didn't. And maybe most of the team is really young and it's fine for them, but you're going to have to find a space in your place where you do this. Have you, like, what are some of the wackier things that you've been hearing from folks?
Yeah, I mean, I've been hearing folks in almost kind of fire sale mode, just trying to get out of everything they can, right? And just shutting down all their locations and saying, we'll figure this out later. And I think that's a very tough decision in terms of how you want to run a business, right? You know, folks want some form of stability. And I think we still have a little bit more to see how this all flushes out. So, you know, there's that. And then there's the tactical solutions of how everyone's solving for social distancing, right? You know, I've been hearing folks are going to just stack all their conference rooms brim full so no one can even enter the room because we don't want to deal with all the circumstances for shared space and all of that policing. So that's going to be incredibly interesting to see how behaviorally we promote these new best practices, because it's kind of hard enough to get everyone to understand how to use the space. Now we're going to be really restricting folks in the next year or so. And that'll be a challenge for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I was sort of thinking about some of these pronouncements from companies that might be taking more dramatic steps. I suppose if my company told me we were going to be all work from home from now on, I'd have to start thinking about what I do with my own home. Like I've got to like redesign it, or I might have to move or something.
Yeah.
From the company perspective, you're sort of blowing up a big investment, right? I mean, imagine you had to go to your CFO and tell him that was your recommendation for the new Dropbox HQ. You spent millions of dollars to build that thing. That seems like a one-way door that's tough to go through. And you might sit as a staff member and worry that that decision will get reversed in a certain amount of time. And then that has more implications again, because the commute path might change. What's the location? My life is upside down again. There's quite a bit of instability as some of these decisions get made. I suppose none of these, the high drama things are not yet on the table for you.
Yeah, I think we are invested in our major hubs and even our smaller satellite offices. We really want to make sure that we have those wonderful people with us for the long term. And so that's our top priority. And, you know, again, we're very fortunate in that this crisis has not impacted us negatively. And so we are able to support our teams. And I just feel really honored to be in a position to do so.
You might have seen something come out from Google in the last couple of weeks where they, quote unquote, hit pause on a very large project, I think in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And some of the chatter I heard around that from folks that don't know what's going on inside included both views. One was like, it's a pause, they'll be back. And there were others thinking, well, these guys are very principled and they don't do things casually. They might have some really strong point of view here. A couple of friends that were closer to that, who were speaking to me about it, expressed a really interesting and novel point of view that they no longer want to concentrate all their people in a single location in a region, or at least they're thinking about that. They no longer want to do that. However, they still want these central points in the region. They're just going to need more. And so if you think about like a map of the Bay Area, yes, Mountain View is important, but there's going to be an Oakland and a Berkeley and a San Jose, and there's going to be a whole bunch more locations. We're no longer going to have a day where 80% of the staff is in one of the buildings. It's going to be 20% across all the buildings. We're just going to spend more money on real estate because we want our people to be dispersed across locations for risk. And we want to take the benefit of shorter commute times and maybe lowering carbon footprint and things like that. To me, that sounded like quite a bold vision of the future. And it's like a 180 from the way they've been doing it, right? They've been building some of the biggest campus locations. Turning a region into a campus is a really big change from strategy. Can you visualize that from where you sit?
Yeah, I mean, there is something to be said about work local, that kind of decentralization. I know that a lot of folks will be really excited about those opportunities as they come up. And when we look at employee heat maps, there are these different centers of gravity around the main hub. And so there's a chance to try to drive that. However, I wonder, the human connection and some of the value that the office brings when you aren't talking about the major metropolitans. What does that do when, folks are dispersed all around, in terms of big strategy and team decisions and cross-functional decisions? Whereas if everyone's siloed, it maybe could do just as well at home, right?
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, I mean, there's sort of like a minimum amount of people you need around you for it to start feeling like you're part of a community of colleagues.
Yeah.
But there's probably also a maximum above which you don't really get that much benefit. I mean, I'm sort of visualizing one of these office towers in Manhattan where like Morgan Stanley has 50,000 employees and everyone's got a Morgan Stanley badge, and that's great. But the idea that 50,000 people in a 30-story building elevator stack are like all collaborating fluidly seems to me a little bit overstated.
Yeah.
There's a certain kind of, your 200 or 300 who are around you are really your core group. And sure, you get on the elevator on, once a week to get to the 32nd floor, and then another time in the week to go to the 14th floor. But these are not really like your home bases. And I wonder what the natural size of a community is, because that seems like what you got to solve for if you want to create that level of collegiality, right?
Right, and really garner trust in that relationship building, because that's how we get stuff done, right? It's not always just about a work product. It's about thinking about how to move and shift and change. And so, quite honestly, as my team has been problem solving on the fly, I do really wish sometimes that we were all in a room together and just whiteboarding, and we're trying to do that on technology, and it's okay. But for the when you're pivoting global strategy, nothing beats in person.
Yeah, I mean, it's really true. And I guess that's sort of my last theme for you as the person who takes care of the offices for all your people at a time that there are no offices. What is the argument for office? I mean, what is the value proposition of your department to your people? What has it been and what will it always be? Like a different version of that question, there's like a Bezos line of sometimes people ask what's going to change. And I think a lot of the conversations we've been having in this period are, oh, hey, what's going to be different in 2 years or in 5 years? But maybe another way to put the question is, what's not going to be different in 2 years or 5 years? What's always going to be true?
I think it'll always be true that the best way to build a new relationship is to have a face-to-face coffee chat, to see someone in the hallway, to grab them for a second, to overhear conversations and join in or gather something. And for the younger generation just building their careers, that informal mentorship is really hard in a remote situation. And so to build that scalability of the team and that legacy planning, a lot of that will be important. And so the team will have to come together. Now, the frequency of that and the physical location we'll play around with quite a bit. But I think that, that human connection is priceless.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's been amazing to have you, Nasim. It's been really interesting to hear how you guys think about all this, and inspiring.
It's been great to, rub that crystal ball a little bit with you, figure out what we're going to be doing soon, but we'll see. The new normal will be fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think the core theme of the conversation has been this is about your people. And it's really interesting to hear how you think about that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thanks for everyone for joining. We will post a recording for those of you who want to share with colleagues. And thank you again, Nasim Yalpani from Dropbox.
Thank you.